Hello, present people. Welcome to episode 2 of the Present podcast, where I talk with the most courageous makers around the world to find out more about their background, process, and life. Today's conversation is with Adam Barnard, founder of Otto Resources, a digital design archive, research facility, and ecosystem for future-proof design discovery. We talk about his upbringing and personal journey, how he grew up in Botswana and ended up in Berlin, where he works and lives today. We talk about his early love for skateboarding and the influence Tony Hawk's PlayStation game had on both of us. We discuss the good and the harmful sides of running your own business and his dream of building the Wikipedia of design. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Adam Barnard, and let's dive in. Adam, I'm so happy we're doing this. Tell us more about your upbringing and your personal journey, how you ended up where you are right now.
I grew up in Botswana. My father is from Zimbabwe and my mother is from England originally. And I think it's quite cliche to say, but I grew up in a very free and creative household. Much of my pursuits and ideas were greatly encouraged by my family and my parents specifically. There were no limits, I would say. If there was anything that I wanted to try, anything that I wanted to explore, they were always incredibly supportive of me. And I think without that very necessary foundation, I wouldn't be where I am today. And at least I wouldn't have made the successes and made also the failures that brought me to, like I said, where I am today. So yeah, I think after we left Botswana, we moved to England for a short amount of time.
Yeah.
And that was interesting for me because it was a severe culture shock moving from a country like Botswana to a country like England as a 15-year-old boy going to high school. In terms of attitude, in terms of approach to stuff like creativity, language, culture, there was a lot of things that really inspired me and scared me simultaneously. But I think what moving to England showed me was that I was very interested in culture and subculture generally, because as a young boy, it wasn't quite clear to me the effect it was having on me. I was like, okay, we've moved to this new country. And in my mind at the time, I was like, everything is just weird for me. That's kind of the only way I could describe it. I was like, these people are weird. The way they act is weird. The way they talk is weird. What they're interested in is weird, because it was all so foreign to me.
Did you have any touch points when you growing up in Botswana, or was it really like kind of isolated when it comes to pop culture in this sense?
No, it definitely wasn't isolated at all, I would say. I mean, obviously, growing up with a British mother, we would also visit England regularly, so I had a constant touch point with what was happening in England. But in Botswana, we had access to TV, we had MTV, we had Nickelodeon, we had all of these channels, and I think that it wasn't a shock in that sense. It was, I knew it, I understood it, it wasn't something new to me, so to say. But being confronted by it on a daily basis, then, obviously is very different from having these year trips with my mother, where we would go once a year and we would go for a couple of weeks, versus actually living in the country, your understanding of culture and again, how people interact with their own cultures is wildly different.
Yeah.
So I think that was an incredibly informative moment for me, because when I look back at it, I realize how much passion I have also for British culture, subculture, the music scene. It had an insane influence on me. And it was also beautiful because when I combine that kind of knowledge, which I would say is more pop, mainstream, if you will, with the subcultural knowledge and cultural knowledge that I was able to develop in my upbringing in Botswana, it kind of created this beautiful patchwork of information for me. And I think that was foundational for my beginning, because I realized that I had a huge passion for it. I was interested in knowing why the music sounded a certain way in Botswana versus why it sounded a certain way in England, why people interacted with music in the way they did in Botswana versus England. You know, there was just a lot of things that it kind of started to open up for me. And I think that that was really when I first began to understand my passion for research, culture, subculture, interpersonal connection.
Amazing.
And this was incredibly important. So again, I think that if my parents hadn't have been so supportive, maybe I wouldn't have indulged in this side of things. I probably would have just seen it and kind of brushed it off. But because of my upbringing, I was kind of encouraged to also look at these things a little bit closer, to dig a little bit deeper, to try and move away from this perception of it just being weird for me. I was like, yes, it's weird because it's something that I don't know, but I want to understand it. And I think, yeah, that was also something my parents always encourage. It's like, ask questions, try and understand it, try go deeper. Don't just look at it and assume you don't like it and brush it off.
That's amazing. It really sounds like they gave you this trust or encouragement to do your own
completely
digging, your own research, you know.
I think that was so vital, because it's like, I could have, I mean, whenever I came to my parents and said, yeah, I don't like something or I hate something, you know, as a teenager, you hate everything, right? So I hate this. And they're like, but what is it you hate about it? And then by kind of asking myself this question or these questions at an early age, you're forced to confront this thing. And then oftentimes you find things that you like within it. And that was another very foundational learning. It's like, try and find something that inspires you or that you are interested in everything. It's for this reason that I listen to every genre of music, for example, or I read every kind of book, because I believe that even if it's not exactly my thing or it's a bit perpendicular to my taste, I will find something inside that I can relate to or that I find interesting.
A big part of being creative is tapping into different cultures, let's say, and being open-minded and really putting it all together, because a lot of times something new is really just a new combination of two different topics or something like that. So
completely,
it seems like you really you were really lucky to early on kind of maybe create your very unique universe of a lot of different references and ideas and subcultures.
Completely. But I think in combination with my parents being so open to it, I think in Botswana, I grew up skateboarding. Skateboarding was, and this is something I also have to be very thankful for, because this made me who I am today. And I think this really accelerated my interest in culture more generally, because we lived in Botswana and I was skateboarding, which, if you look back, is traditionally an American sport, which was then obviously propelled by PlayStation games like Tony Hawk's and Tony Hawk's Underground. I grew up playing Tony Hawk's Underground, and I was enamored in this game. I looked up to this game not only for the narrative, the style, the figures, but also the music that you were confronted by. Fantastic. I still listen to the Tony Hawk's Underground soundtrack today,
I know.
because it taught me so much about punk, metal, hip hop, all sorts of music. And I was like, this for me, I mean, being confronted by this kind of variety as someone living in Botswana at the time was also quite unique, I would say. And this is again a direct result of pop culture and the technological revolution with the rise of PlayStation 1 and then 2. And I was primed, you know what I mean? I grew up in Botswana, already confronted with this mass of input from around the world. And by playing games, again, like Tony Hawk, as trivial as it sounded, it made me also, like I said, be ready to find things that were interesting to me, no matter the situation.
I love this Tony Hawk reference, because I can totally relate to it. I was skateboarding myself, and this game really, it was just so mind blowing and then so new at this time or so different. And as you said, it was not only the game or the gameplay or that you could actually, skateboard in a video game, but the whole culture around it. I mean, you got to know all these different skateboarders, these different characters. And then also I think the different levels or different maps, like on Venice Beach, or then you are like, you got to know a lot of different famous skate spots, because I think either it was like exactly those spots or they rebuilt them around the world. And the music, again, it was, as you said, it was also quite a wild mix of like punk and rock and hip hop. And it's interesting how it's like really ingrained in your brain. I was also finding myself not too long ago having this 1 hour mixtape on YouTube of I think it was Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 or something. I had to find the game that was where I started. I think it was it was 1 or 2. Remember, it was the best Christmas ever. PlayStation, and this game was like I couldn't stop. That's beautiful memories, and it's true. I mean, I found the skateboarding in itself is so interesting, because you obviously get to know, like with every sports, team sports, you get closer to a lot of people that you maybe also normally not get in touch with. So it's like a big melting pot, especially because skateboarding it's like the least elitist. You don't have to have a club membership, or you don't go to a specific, training ground, but it's on the street and you meet with the kids in your neighborhood. And also this whole culture is also very tied to brands. I think it was really, you identified so much with these certain brands. Also because the skateboard itself has a certain motive and design and brand.
Exactly.
I remember there was a lot of, I was having skateboards a lot from Girl, the skateboard brand Girl. They did also already back then a lot of collaborations with pro skaters who did kind of design their own boards, or you could have the same skateboard as Eric Coston. Was this a guy? There was this guy.
Yeah, sure. Classic. Yeah. Eric Coston was amazing. I had an Eric Coston board where Girl Skateboards did a collaboration with, I believe it was a charity organization called Red, and it was fantastic. I thought it was so cool living in Botswana with a board like this. It was just crazy for me to think.
I mean, everything also from the clothes and the shoes, and I mean, there was a lot of, it was a whole lifestyle. So that's why it was
completely,
identified with this and like.
But I think what games like, I mean, not to kind of go too deep on the topic of Tony Hawk's Underground, but I think what was so powerful for me and what resonated so much with me was actually the narrative behind these stories, because I really feel that was one of the first Tony Hawk's games to put the one side or one story from within the broad world of skateboarding into like a very engaging narrative. They painted this picture of this young skateboarder with a lot of talent who kind of had to work his way up through the ranks from having nothing to getting a sponsorship, to competing in amateur competitions, to turning pro. And I don't know, it was just something, as someone in Botswana, like I said, where we didn't have these kind of opportunities. I mean, in South Africa, where the skateboarding scene was much more developed, we didn't really have that in Botswana. And in my town where I lived, there was like 3 people who skateboarded. So for me, that was like my version of a Hollywood movie. Of course, it was a game and it was all animated, no real people. But like, I was seeing this and I was dreaming of these aspirations, this real underdog story of having no endorsements, but having talent and then seeing where that can take you. And for me, it was the representation of a dream, so to say. Yeah. Skateboarding was just one part of that, but it could be applied to anything. And I think, without sounding too lame or kitschy or anything, what Tony Hawk's Underground showed me is that you can come from having little. I mean, don't get me wrong, I have a very privileged background, but I mean in the sense that you have a talent and no one recognizes you for it. And then eventually with hard work, determination, you get to this kind of stage that you envision or that you dream about.
I love it. I love this analogy. I think for me, skateboarding as well, but also shortly after skateboarding, I was wanting to be a pro football player. So it was all about football. So I was joining, a team in Cologne, a club that I loved, and I had this one buddy. Shout outs to Darius. He was a bit older. He was really my older brother, and he was already deep into it, like this dream of becoming a professional athlete, professional football player. And to this day, I really think it had a huge influence on me. This whole getting, first of all, into sports and having like these dreams and like this whole journey of getting better at this sport, at this discipline, and also in sports, you have this clear path. Like you train a lot, you do. The harder you work, the further you get, and also this notion of, we said like earlier on, we were like, I want to be the best defensive player in the world, or the best footballer in the world, and this kind of like huge dreams that you can have in sports, like you formulate these goals, and of course they're very, very ambitious and very like dreamy, but I think it really ingrained in me this core drive of like practice, work on your discipline. The further you get, or you get, the closer you get to your goals and dreams. And this is a very, I think, sports mindset.
Of course.
Because in the creative industries where we are working in, it's not that clear, obviously. It's not that of a clear path. I think that's why I'm sometimes a bit envious if I'm seeing like the NBA and basketball players, and like Kobe Bryant was like the first guy on the training ground and the last one to leave, and he was just shooting more and training more than the others, and it's just directly translated into his success. And sometimes I'm a bit envious of this clarity of the path, I mean, maybe you can translate it also with creative jobs, and I think this is sometimes also very healthy to maybe think about this, because if you want to become a writer, the more you get yourself to actually write, the more you produce, the more consistent you are, the more chances of success. So there is a correlation to this, but it's not that.
Yeah, for sure.
Sometimes
for sure. I mean, it's a necessary component, no? Like hard work, determination, grit, I guess you would call it, are incredibly important factors, but it's not everything, especially in the creative industry, as you so rightfully said. The industry is fraught with complexities of like, who do you know, who can talk for you, who can vouch for you. And of course, the industry is built on a large degree of luck. Yeah, there are pockets of luck that some people fall into. I don't think that it's necessarily always to do with talent. And again, I don't want to be pessimistic or anything like that, but I think it's common, let's say, that you could work as hard as you like in the creative industry, but I think that unfortunately there will always be people who you probably think don't do as much as you, or maybe not as deserving as you, are in these great positions, and you can't help but wonder. And it's not to say that these people aren't talented or that these people don't deserve it by any means, but what I'm saying is that the wheel of luck in the creative industry is quite a deciding factor, I think. And 100%. Sometimes it falls on your side of the fence, sometimes not.
Yeah, it's true. But I think there's also, it's such a layered topic, because obviously you can really get yourself into a position where you have a higher chance of luck, the certain kind of luck, if you really consistently put yourself out of, let's say, your comfort zone, or like consistently put a lot of effort, you increase your chances of luck finding you. This also exists, I think, which I think is also a refreshing thing to think of, because then you give yourself back the power. Otherwise, if you say, I need luck and either it finds me or not, this can be very depressing, I think, because you give give away control. But yeah,
I think that's an interesting topic. And I think this is obviously a huge thing in the creative industry more generally. It's that it's quite easy to reach this point of burnout or to feel as though you're not good enough, because if you work as a freelancer, for example, or even if you are just more generally a creative who's trying to communicate your unique take on your specific craft, it's a lot of running into the abyss almost. You're continuously pushing this vision that you think is worthwhile, and you keep going, and despite multiple failures, multiple rejections, you still keep going. And it's incredibly disheartening, I think, at times, and very tiring. But I think on the other side of that debate, it's also very rewarding. It's difficult, I would say, because I think that, in these situations, it's easy to say, that person just got lucky and I deserve the job more than him. But, I think that these negative emotions that you maybe feel towards someone else's success or someone else's luck is only ever perpetuated by the nature of the creative industry, which is just like, it's not always sunny. You always have to keep pushing.
True.
And eventually something will stick. Something will stick, but you do have to have a lot of determination. I agree.
I think it's also, just realizing now that it's it can get lonely in the sense that you are responsible for yourself and like you're creating your luck. And in maybe back to the analogy of a team sport like football, you have always your teammates and people you're training together with. I think in the creative space, this usually or rarely the case. Maybe if you are in a team, in an office or something, but just thinking about, for example, us two as like freelancers or running your own business, it can get lonely, and we need to create our own support systems. I think especially for entrepreneurs or freelancers or self-employed people. That's the whole reason why I'm trying to, what I'm trying to build with Present, have the support system to kind of stick together or like have more exchange, because I think this gets sometimes really lost on the way if we are not in this situation where we have a lot of people around us, or we have maybe a boss or someone telling us what to do. But if it's all our own responsibility, that's a huge challenge. And that's why I think it's so important to that we get all the help and all the support we can get, and support each other.
No, I completely agree. This idea of being present, obviously this topic that you continually address and try to clarify for the broader audience. When you reach these moments of frustration as a creative, after, I don't know, weeks of pushing, weeks of promoting yourself, weeks of trying to convince people that what you do is worthy of their attention, it's easy to feel disheartened by it, because you're constantly living in the past on one side, thinking, okay, these are all the people who didn't see my vision. And then you're also living in the future too much, because you're like, okay, I need to keep pushing it and keep selling it to all of these other people. And it's very important in these situations when you feel disheartened, or at least for me anyway, it's like, where am I now in this moment? Like, is it that bad? Yes, I've just come off the back of maybe a couple of not so positive conversations. And in the future, I have a lot of work to do. But in this present moment, things are not that bad. And again, that comes with kind of checking your privilege and understanding where you actually are, because it's easy to lose sight of it, so to say, when all you're doing is running towards this gratification for your work and for your creative practice.
Oh yeah, 100%. That was beautifully said.
Thank you.
Love it. So Adam, I wanted to know what you're working on these days, and maybe you can also tell us a little bit more how you ended up in Berlin, and how Otto Resources was born. Lead us to the journey.
Okay. So just building up from what we were talking on previously, with having moved to England at the age of 15. During college, obviously, like most students, I found a job to tide me over and to afford myself skate gear and all that kind of stuff. to one of my first jobs was at Urban Outfitters in a city called Bath, one of the old Roman capitals of England. They have the geothermic baths there and everything. It's very cool. Or not geothermic. They just have baths, but I'm not sure if it's geothermic. Regardless. I started working at Urban Outfitters. An old college friend of mine, Ben McAdam, actually got me the job there, and I was just working the shop floor. I was working the shop floor as a sales assistant, which was nice. I think again that kind of I'm very grateful for that experience because it opened me up a lot to kind of the diversity, or at least the nuance of British culture at the time. It was like kind of at the height of hyper indie fashion culture. People were listening to the Foals, and it was something that I also completely lost myself in. Again, this was like maybe the second flag along my journey. The first was with Tony Hawk's, where it kind of forced me to look beyond. And then obviously when I started working at Urban Outfitters, I got really into this whole indie culture, the aesthetic of it, why people liked it, the sound of it. It was a good time actually, and I really enjoyed my time at Urban Outfitters. I was still living at home, and I remember having to drive to the nearest town to me and get the train in. It was a lot, but it was a really good time. I was listening to a lot of indie at the time, and just it was great. It was quite foundational for me and my understanding of aesthetics, and allowing me to understand and at least find the things that resonated with me the most, because obviously Urban Outfitters has a lot of stuff. It's a very eclectic mix of design, style, product, and despite that I was still able, because of this connection to culture, able to kind of find the things that I liked and find my way through it. And it really it saw me taking a big aesthetic turn of my own, because before starting there I was always interested in design. I was interested in fashion, but not on quite the same level as I was when I started there, because I was really kind of forced to maybe because I worked at Urban Outfitters, and it was like I thought it was super cool at the time, and it was cool at the time. It was really having a moment. So I really felt this almost drive or this pressure to like kind of present myself in a new way, to have a style, to have an opinion, to like certain music and to stand behind that. So it was very important, even though at the time I was like, oh God, I hate this job. Like Christmas came around and I was like, I want to scream at every customer that walks through the door. But thinking back, it was very, very foundational for me. So long story short, I worked at Urban Outfitters, and then as soon as I finished college, I realized that England wasn't really the country for me, and I wanted to move out. I wanted to try something different. I wanted to make some new experiences, and I went on a city break to Berlin. It was kind of booked on a whim. It didn't really have any reason behind it. It wasn't like I really want to go to visit Berlin in the winter kind of thing at all. It was just like, Berlin sounds cool, let's try it. And I came here on a city break, and as cliche and as lame as it sounds, I didn't party. I didn't go to a single bar. I didn't do any clubs. I didn't do anything. I just basically walked around the city, went to a few stores, went to the museum island and stuff like this. But it did something in me. I had these, I won't say butterflies, I won't exaggerate, but I had a feeling in my stomach that this could be a good place for me somehow. But I couldn't quite compartmentalize it. I couldn't justify it. I couldn't explain it. But I spent a couple of days here. I got back to England, and I was like, told my parents, guys, I want to move to Berlin. And they were like, oh, goodness. And it was quite funny because up until that point, they'd been so supportive. And so, they'd really stood behind everything I did. But at this point, I think they realized that I was ready to leave the house. And I think that kind of changed the dynamic. So rather, they were still incredibly supportive, but I could also feel their pain, feel their tension, knowing that we were going to reach this moment that I could leave to Berlin and never come back again, which is pretty much what happened. So I sympathize with how they're feeling. But yeah, it was really as instantaneous as that. And I came back and I said, guys, I'm going to do it. I want to move. And actually, while I was in Berlin, I had already gone to Urban Outfitters in Berlin and given in my CV. And then as soon as I got back, I went to my manager in Bath and I said, can you please file for a transfer? I want to move.
Okay.
And that's how it happened.
That's nice.
I got transferred, and yeah, I think it was funny. It was a funny transition because up until this point, I think that my parents could always kind of foresee the result. I said, I want to try skateboarding. Yeah. They could kind of visualize what that would entail. But when I came back and I said, guys, I want to move to Berlin, it was like a black box for them. They were like, we don't know what this means. We don't know where he's going. We don't know what he's going to do. They knew I was going to go work for Urban Outfitters, but the rest was kind of, it was a huge question mark for them. So regardless of that, they were still incredibly encouraging. And my father was like, yeah, if you feel like this is the right decision, you should totally go for it. Also my mother in her own way was incredibly supportive, but also a bit more reserved that I was leaving. So got to Berlin. And my interest in fashion had kind of reached a new level, obviously informed by the culture of Berlin. I never really conformed to the way that people in Berlin dress or the way that people in Berlin perceive style, but still my own personal style, my own personal standing of design and fashion sharpened somewhat. And it was at this point that I started to understand that I actually wanted to do something more professional with my time. I wanted to actually make a run at this world of fashion or of design, whatever you want to call it. Yes. I mean, typically I tell people I don't work in the fashion industry. I kind of work adjacent to it. The fashion that I now produce with Otto is more just a byproduct of a greater idea. It's a byproduct of research, but it could also be a chair. It could also be a car component. It's just a result of a deeper thinking. But regardless, when I realized that I wanted to actually maybe make this my career or to give it a try at least, I applied for an internship at Norse Projects in Copenhagen. And again, much like my decision to move to Berlin, it was kind of done on a whim. I was like, I'm just going to shoot them an email, completely unsolicited, with a copy of my CV. Actually never thinking that they would get back to me, and eventually they did. And they invited me to move to Copenhagen to do the internship. And it was quite funny because I think I didn't realize at the time how much of a profound effect Berlin had already had on me in the space of a year. So this had happened in the space of a year, from 2013 to 2014. This had all happened, and I'd been through the full mix of emotions in Berlin, with having met someone, meeting new friends, finding myself in a weird way, living independently from my parents. There was a lot of things that happened, and I never really appreciated the profound effect the city had on me until I left. I moved away for the first time, and I don't know, I felt like I'd just gone through like an epic breakup. I was distraught. I was completely heartbroken to leave Berlin, to leave my life. But I was like, this is important for me. I need to be in Copenhagen. I just need to stick it out. And I moved to Copenhagen in 2014, and I got on with it. I did my internship despite my, I would say, emotional stress and the fact that I miss Berlin so much. But I stuck through it, and it was another informative milestone for me, because that sharpened my approach to design yet again. So I kind of had British subculture that informed me in the first place. This was then sharpened through the lens of Berlin, and then I moved to Copenhagen, and I had all of these influences of the constitutions of Danish design, which was hyper minimal, not as functional. I mean, yes, it was as functional as German design, but obviously German design is kind of built on this idea of functionality. Then you kind of go there, and it's built on this idea of natural materials, minimalism. Obviously, it has a roster of legacy designers. As long as your arm, it's fantastic. So again, this brought my understanding and my own approach to design to a completely new level again. So that was interesting for my trajectory because it just kind of went from step to step to step. And with each of these milestones, I understood myself more. I understood what I liked more. And I understood, I think, also in Copenhagen specifically to stand behind my opinion and to take pride in the things I liked. Because in England, as a 15-year-old or even as an 18-year-old working at Urban Outfitters, you adhere to certain social codes. You're like, I dress like this because I like indie music. And you're not so explicit with it because people kind of be like, oh, that's weird that you like that kind of thing. You know? So I kind of adhered to a social group, a social aesthetic, but I never really stood behind it or took pride in it. But then when I moved to Copenhagen, that was kind of the first time that it really changed for me. And I really started to stand behind the things I loved. It's like, yes, I love this brand because I really like this detailing, or I like the designer's story, or I like the materials that they use. And my colleagues at Norse Projects really encouraged me to indulge in these interests and these thoughts. And that was incredibly influential for me. So after that internship, I moved back to Berlin. I was away for a year, again, from 2014 to 2015. Yeah. And then I moved back to Berlin. Actually, I moved back.
What was the role? Sorry, what was your role? What was actually also, I don't know if you mentioned what you were studying and also what did you do for Norse?
So at that point, I had only been to college. I hadn't been to university at this point, you know? So I was 21. 22 years old.
Yeah.
And
so young.
I had actually tried university in London before I left. And I think I lasted about a month, and I had to have the very hard conversation with my parents. I called up my father and I said, it's not working. There's something about this course, there's something about this city, there's something about this university that's just, it's not right for me, and I need to cut it short. So I moved to Berlin, and I moved to Copenhagen without a university degree. So doing an internship at the time was a little bit bizarre because I did the internship before I did my studies. So which was great actually, because I approached it in a completely different way, completely free of I would say institutional requirements. I didn't have a university breathing down my neck saying you need to learn this. It's like I went there to self-educate myself.
Right.
And I was just a creative intern. I helped with the photo shoots. I helped with writing copy. I helped with e-commerce. Kind of did a little bit of everything, as you do, I think, in a lot of internships.
Yeah.
And especially in an internship where I didn't really have much to offer. I was still finding myself, and I was just there also, like I said, to learn. I came back to Berlin because I got offered a job at Store. Funnily enough, while I was at Norse Projects, I got an email from Hugo Hoppmann, who I still see from time to time in Berlin, and it's always a great pleasure to spend some time with him and to hear his great opinion on product and design. And he thankfully messaged me one day, or he emailed me and asked if I was in Berlin. And I said, no, I'm not in Berlin, I'm in Copenhagen, but I would really like to come back now, you know, because I think after a year, I was like, it's time for me to go home. Yeah. So I came home basically, and I started up at Store working together with Herbert in the office. Again, my role was largely focused on e-commerce. I would support him on certain creative tasks. And again, my understanding of aesthetic and understanding of product design and the things that I like was sharpened further. And it was an interesting, weird, emotionally challenging phase for me, I think, the Store years. But it was informative and necessary. And I stayed at Store until I actually started studying at the UDK. I studied Gesellschafts- und Wirtschaftskommunikation, communication in social and economic contexts. Silly translation, but I don't know. I really wanted to challenge myself. I think also that was a main thing, or one of the main reasons that I actually didn't study in London, because it's not that I felt that it was too easy, but it's that I felt that it didn't present much of a challenge, because I already realized at that age that I could learn and retain information very well. You know, I would read a book once and I could recite it. And I was like, in England, I can do that. I can learn. If I open the, it's not that I think I'm beyond any sort of education or think that I'm God's gift to the earth by any means, but I realized at university there that it's like, there's nothing more than me just learning these books. There's no inherent challenge. Yes, I'm learning, I'm feeding my mind with information, but there's something missing for me. I need a little bit of extra spice. So I was like, I want to study in German.
Okay.
And that's why I applied to the UDK program. It was an incredible 3 years. Honestly, like, I look back at it with such a smile on my face, and I really remember it very fondly. Also, from my professors to my fellow classmates, the literature that I was on one side made to read, the literature on the other side that I enjoyed reading. It was just a beautiful 3 years that really shaped me into the person that I am today in many respects. And again, in parallel, being able to learn all of that in German was just like a whole new world for myself. It wasn't just like I'm studying in English. It's like, no, like, I not only completed this course and learned a ton of new things, I did it in German, and I can say that my level of German is much better than when I first came here, and I took a lot of pride in that, I think. And obviously you feel like more of a part of the Berlin community, the Berlin society. You can connect with people on a much deeper level. You can have conversations. It just made my whole experience richer on multiple levels, personal, intellectually, everything. And I think I quit Rüstort to start at the UDK. And then while I was studying there, I took the first year of my course, I took off just to focus on studying. I had spent some time up to that saving and preparing myself. I was like, okay, I wanted to have the first year of university be as impactful as possible. I was like, I just want a year to just soak up as much information as I can get my hands on. I don't want to be worried about going to work. I don't want to be worried about this, that, and the other. So I was like, I'm going to save enough so that I can just have 1 year of being a complete sponge and just soaking in everything. And that's what I did. The first year of university, I just took in everything that it could throw at me, not only on an educational level, but also on a personal level with my colleagues, which is obviously like a huge contrast to now. I mean, now I feel like I would definitely work much more than I hang out with people. But when I was in my first year of university, I did everything because I gave myself the time to do it. And it was a beautiful moment. And after this first year, I was like, okay, I need to start working again. And I applied to a job at Highsnobiety. And a little parenthesis, something I forgot to mention, which was again very informative for me, was that while I was doing my internship at Norse Projects, Copenhagen is an expensive city, so I needed to kind of make a little extra money to get by. I started working as a weekend editor for Hypebeast in Hong Kong. I applied to them again on a whim, much like my decision to visit Berlin, much like my decision to apply for the internship. I reached out to them. I was like, hey guys, I'm doing my internship here, and I know how to write. I'm interested in culture. I'm interested in the topics that you guys cover. Would you be interested in some support? And the process went quite smoothly, actually. I was hired as the weekend editor shortly after that, and that was kind of towards it was about like 3 or 4 months into my time in Copenhagen. And I basically kept doing that. I kept doing that well into my time at Woostore as well. So in addition to Woostore, I was also working at Hypebeast. And again, that was great because I was really given an opportunity to indulge in this need I had to learn, absorb information, and also give information further, you know? So
yeah.
I was just working as an editor though. So every weekend that came around, I was the weekend guy for Hypebeast. I would log on and I would basically do all of the news posts. Sometimes I would do editorials, I would do interviews. And it was an interesting time because it was also on the other side quite lonely. Like all of my colleagues, people I normally had hot contact to in Hong Kong were just like offline because it was the weekend. Obviously. And then it was just me kind of working these weird shifts on the weekend, just writing about new product releases, writing about things that I was interested in. It was a beautiful time actually. And I met some great people through that, people who I'm still in contact with today, thankfully. So yeah, that was fun. So like I said, that kind of kicked in about 3 months into my stay in Copenhagen. And then I kept doing that even all the way through Woostore. My capacity changed a little bit while I was at Woostore, obviously, because I had to dedicate my time to that. But I was still writing as an editor. And then, like I said, when I took, that also allowed me to save up enough to be able to take that first year of university kind of off. And yeah, like I think I kind of used that to get myself a job at Highsnobiety because I already kind of, you know, they're so close to one another in terms of what they do, and now not, but in the infancy of both of these projects, or at the beginning of both of these projects, there was like a great deal of overlap, so to say. So I knew some team members there. I think some of them also knew of my work and knew that I was working for Hypebeast. So it kind of made getting a job there quite straightforward, I'm very happy to say. And yeah, I then started back up as the weekend editor because I had to study from Monday to Friday, or Monday to Thursday I was studying, and then from Friday to Sunday I was again working the weekend shift, this time at Highsnobiety.
Intense. It sounds intense. How did you manage that? Or was it just a youthful energy and you just like did it all, or how did you manage this? It seems to be a lot.
It was total youthful energy, I think, and it was just again kind of what we spoke about when we had our conversation. I think it was like a month or so ago there when we had a check-in together. It was something that I love to do. It's like, wow, I'm studying from Monday to Thursday, which I already love. And then from Friday to Sunday, I go and I write about things that I find interesting in a way that I find interesting.
Fantastic.
So I was just totally indulging myself. But of course, I think I did the whole weekend editor role for about a year or so. And then I had to approach my senior or my managing editor and say, look, I think I really need to transition to the week now because I have more time in the week. I'm now in my second semester at university. My schedule's a bit more forgiving. And also I can't just keep doing the weekend because I'm tired. And this youthful energy and this joy of constantly learning and constantly pushing yourself is always great, but you always hit a wall at some point. And I think a year into study, like I said, in my second year of studying, going into my third, I was really like, guys, I love this job. I really enjoy what I do, but I need to make a little bit of a change and transition away from the weekend. And Highsnobiety was kind enough to accommodate that decision. So then I moved into working as an editor during the week. So yeah. Okay. But I think I don't really know how I managed it, to be honest. Like it just, I didn't really see it as particularly stressful at the time, to be honest. Until I did. Until like I was going into my third semester at uni, I had been doing the weekend editor for like a year, and I was like, guys, it needs to stop now because I'm really tired
Yeah.
and I need a bit more normality, because you can't just keep working like, I mean, I was just working Friday to Sunday on these shifts where no one else was there. You felt a little bit isolated, and also I felt this insane sense of responsibility, you know. It's like I had to do all the posts on the weekend. I had to check everything, and of course there were some posts that didn't go well or things that were not well done, and that's a lot of responsibility when you think about the size of a website like that. But at some point it just kind of became second nature, and it was really enjoyable. And then I transitioned into a more normal working schedule and did that for the final year of my university. So that's in second year at Highsnob. And then as soon as I finished university, I stayed on in a 4-day-a-week capacity. And I did that for another year, I believe. And then kicked in COVID. You know, COVID happened. And then it was time to kind of move on to new opportunities, let's say. So I think at that time I was also doing a little bit of freelance work and working as like trying to really capitalize on my passion for product, while also using all of this knowledge and approach that I had cultivated from Hypebeast and Highsnobiety. So what these two roles really taught me is that I'm learning how to put the concepts of designers into a context that is understandable for multiple people. What if I were to begin this process a step before, which means talking to the designers and helping them put their most ambitious, fluffiest, perhaps, contexts into a real product form? Because it's the same kind of thinking. If you look at it, the logic is the same. It's just kind of applied at a different stage of the process. I hope you know what I mean, right? What I'm trying to say. So that's then how I began as a product consultant. I started to then work with certain brands and help them translate, as I said, their ideas into a physical, viable, and sometimes commercial project.
What does it exactly mean if you say translate the concept? Is it's based on how to actually make things happen, right? Like the whole production part of like researching where to build the actual things and the costs and so on.
Exactly. That's obviously one side of it, but another side of it is also being able to work with people to actually make their ideas realistic without sacrificing the ambitious nature of them. And I think that was always like a very unique challenge, and that's something that you can always get around with good research and good knowledge and understanding. So it's like, for example, I could be working with a designer and they have an incredibly ambitious idea. And it's like you want to realize that for them. You want to help them implement a strategy that sees their idea come to life via a physical product. At Hypebeast and Highsnobiety, my main job was to like, how do we take the most innate value and idea of these individual products and package it in a way that everybody can understand it? So I was like, okay, there's a mechanism in here that I think I could apply to designers. I know that designers have great ideas, sometimes ideas that are perhaps too ambitious for the current time. I can apply this mechanism and allow them to make their ideas understandable, make their ideas realistic. I saw value in this mechanism beyond just being an editor and writing news posts or writing editorial posts. It proved quite well. And I think my challenge was, or what at least I tried to do at the very beginning of my career, if you would call it that, was to say, okay, I want to work with you as a designer and I want to help you translate your most ambitious ideas. It might be that at this current point in time, some of your ideas or your visions are far too future facing. We can't implement it at the time being, but we're going to find a solution that allows us to implement perhaps part of your vision in a very impactful way via a product, via a certain release, via a garment development, whatever it might be. And then, we obviously try to set a strategy that allows us to realize a designer's most ambitious vision in the long run. So, like I said,
It's amazing.
in summary, at Hypebeast and Highsnobiety, I created a mechanism that I thought was also beneficial to another side of the market, or an earlier step in the process. So rather than talking about the collections, I wanted to go a step back and actually create the collections together with the designers. And that's where we kind of get to Otto and the birth of this project and the whole reason, I guess, that we're having this great call today. While I was consulting brands, I was approaching it in much the same way as I did everything else in my life, which was before speaking on anything or before approaching anything, do your due diligence. I was researching like a maniac. Even if the project didn't require it, I would take it upon myself to, in the first instance, learn the requirements of the project, the requirements of the brand, everything like this. I would make a point of learning it perfectly. And then I would start to research around things that could be beneficial for the specific project, right? So what this means was that I was going into all of these projects, no matter how big or how small, with a ton of research, all on my hard drive. I would make these very excessive decks. I would have folders full of images. I would have text segments. I had it all, because I was like, if I am going to, as someone who doesn't have a classic design background, I never trained as a designer. So who am I? Like, what gives me the right to be able to consult you on what I think would work on a product? Nothing really, but my knowledge and my ability to translate this into something counts for a little bit, I think. So, like I said, I was approaching these projects irrespective of their size, with a lot of information behind me. I was like, guys, I've spent a whole week studying your brand, studying your needs, studying your values, and I've also prepared this huge deck of information related specifically to this project. And, I started to understand that certain brands and certain projects would like cherry pick information, which is of course totally fine. They would see this big deck of research and be like, okay, we only find this interesting, or we only want to use this for the season. It's totally normal. Like, there's no chance a designer or a brand or a client would ever like everything that I look in, because as I said, I ramble a bit and I get lost in these like rabbit holes, and I start like throwing out these crazy connections and theories and stuff that I find, which I love, but I think some people can also find it a little too much, which I appreciate. So long story short, after doing this a couple times for different clients, different projects, different brands, I realized that I had a lot of information on my hard drive that nobody was using, that nobody was benefiting from. And I wasn't necessarily going back to it because I had already learned it. The brands weren't using it because they'd already taken what they wanted. So I was like, how about we start a platform that allows me to give this information further and to not just die on my hard drive. And that's effectively how Otto Resource began.
Okay.
It began as an Instagram page. I guess you could call it event for all of the information that I had gathered over my time, first as an editor, and then as a product design consultant. And that's essentially why also the name came to be. So Otto is an acronym, Open Tools for Technical Observation. I also like the Otto's translation in Italian to 8, and this idea of the figure 8 and infinity, and the idea that due diligence and better research can really help people inform and create a truly timeless and impactful product, a product that we all need, and a product that will hopefully withstand the test of time. So that's essentially how, I mean, there's obviously like a lot of nuance along the way. There's a lot of parts of the story that,
Fantastic.
we don't need to get into,
Yeah,
but that's essentially the short of it. It's like from a purely philanthropic standpoint, I was like, I want something just to kind of also force me to look at this information again. Because I also, like I said, I also wasn't looking at it. It was on my hard drive, and I was like, been there, done that kind of thing. But I was like, no, this is a great opportunity for me to remind myself of all these beautiful rabbit holes that I got lost in, and also to hopefully raise the baseline of information out there somewhat. It's like,
to give back also. I mean, it's like, instead of rotting on some hard drive, it's really information that you publish then also eventually, and maybe give other people a chance to tap into that.
Exactly.
Make it public, basically, right?
Exactly.
I mean, this is maybe leading to this question of, can you walk us through this transition of Otto starting more like an anonymous, I think we also like maybe faceless Instagram, and this transition to you saying, okay, I put my face on it, I create a real also visual identity, creating this website and a newsletter and so on, and saying, okay, this is Otto Resources by Adam Barnard, and putting your face to it, and making it a real operation in a way also, I guess.
Yeah, I don't really think, I'm not really sure when it was that I decided to take this step into being a bit more public facing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think at some point after just posting on Instagram, I was like, I started to realize, or at least it's kind of my theory of things. I was like, the information is cool, it's interesting, but it's also at some point not very relatable, because people can't really connect it to something. They don't then know if Otto is a brand. They don't really know if Otto is a person.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, maybe it's time for me to actually put myself behind it, so that then people, when they see the information on there, they understand that it's coming from someone who has a little experience in the industry. I hope that's at least how some people would see it. And like I said, it was just an opportunity for us to make it a little bit more accessible, to effectively put a name, to put a face to this very anonymous name. Because before we took this step, it was purely just a vent. It was just literally like information on hard drive, put it on Instagram. There was nothing more than that. And at some point, I realized that people needed to know that there was someone behind it who really actually cared. And I do care, I really care about this information. I care about people having better access to design knowledge, to treatment knowledge, to textile information. This for me is incredibly important. Also because I hate gatekeeping. I'm fundamentally against it in every way. So I was like, but people need to see that there is actually an empathetic person stood behind this information. I never wanted Otto to be seen as for example, there was a phase where a lot of big brands were releasing these research page initiatives. Nike had one, I think Reebok had one. They had these kind of shadow accounts where they were offering users, if you knew kind of thing. They were offering you access to behind the scenes images, development pictures and stuff like this. And these things were always done in service of the bigger brand. It gave the brand cultural equity. It justified its movements. It helped with marketing. It helped with communication. And I was like, I don't want Otto to be put in that bucket. I don't want people to look at the information that I think is very genuine and important. I don't want people to see that information and think it's just trying to service a brand, or it's just like a marketing ploy or a communication ploy. And that's when, at that moment, I said, okay, I need to put my face behind it so people can see that there is an actual person behind this, not a brand, not a corporation, not some VC fund. It's just me. I care about this information, and I care that people see it and have access to it. And that's effectively why I decided to to become more public facing. And the studio on Merindam was also like a strategic decision, because again, despite me putting my name behind things, hopefully making it a little bit more relatable and personal, it was still highly digital, and people need a physical touch point. All of this information, all of these visuals, everything, it's cool, but it also has its limit, because then it just remains in this digital realm, and again, it loses a level of accessibility. But as soon as you have a physical space, where what we kind of try to do here whenever we have events is that we welcome people so that they can understand the physical result of using a platform like Otto properly. So if you follow all the steps on Otto, or if you use that as your go-to resource for information, you can create, I don't know, curtains, or you can create a new jacket, you can create a pair of pants, you can create a chair, whatever you want. It's like, if you take the time to learn the information and to actively study it, you will be rewarded with a result that, even if it doesn't resonate with a global community, it resonates with you on a personal level. And you feel fulfilled by it, because you feel that not only have you created something physical, which I think is gratifying for everybody, you have also learned a great deal along the way. And that's, again, pretty much the story of my life in many ways. So that's effectively why we decided to do it. And I think, again, with the advent of the new identity and the advent of launching the website, I was like, I want to take it to a new level. And I was like, I really see and I really believe in the potential of a platform like Otto Resource. I think people could benefit from it, not just those in my immediate surroundings, which is what it always was. It was always just people who knew me and were maybe a little bit interested in design. They would follow Otto and we would talk about it and stuff like this. But I was like, at some point, I really decided to take a leap of faith and believe in my idea and say, people need this on a bigger scale. Let's go, let's commit. And that's why I decided to really just go all in with the website. Obviously, lovingly developed together with Felix Steindl. Felix started as a project partner, but has honestly become a very close friend of mine. And I appreciate his opinion, his perspective, and his general approach to design and the use of the creation of systems for the delivery of knowledge. It's been a really foundational moment, I would say, in my career, building this website. It was like a year and a half in the making, I would say, from concept to actual soft launch. I mean, we still haven't officially launched it. We still haven't had like the official launch post. We have a new website kind of thing. We still haven't done that, because we're still in the soft launch phase, because what we are doing at Otto, or at least on the Otto website, in my opinion, is so new, and there's so many new functions that we are developing on a daily basis. It feels like every week I talk to Felix and we're like, oh, we forgot about that, we need to address that kind of thing, and it's just like, just seeing the vision go from this very small seed into something like this is incredibly gratifying, because the core of what I'm trying to do with the website is just to make the process of acquiring knowledge, the process of learning, enjoyable and inspiring, not boring, not fuddy-duddy. Like, this is not a textbook. These are things that are incredibly inspiring. You just need to take the time to look at them. Here's a system that allows you to do that intuitively. It looks good, it functions well, it's well written, has nice images. It's like trying to make learning fun again, trying to make it cool, trying to make it sexy, trying to make it accessible, because a lot of people just don't do it. And due diligence in the fashion industry is all but skipped by a lot of people. Not everyone, I don't want to generalize by any means, but a lot of designers are like, they don't do much research. It's like, I
Yeah.
I have a cool idea.
I think it's, can 100% relate to it for present, in the sense that I think also your, not target group, but the people in your community, or let's say designers, obviously are super visual people. And I like to consume stuff, whatever it is, also for educational reasons, that looks nice or that I can maybe identify with. Or it's just like a pleasure, and in a cool form, in a form that makes it easier also maybe to digest and to learn and make it a little bit more fun. I think everything that tries to make learning cooler is super important, and it's super worthwhile endeavor.
Completely.
It's really nice that you're approaching this. And also it's a lot of giving back, right? I mean, it's such a personal project that, obviously everything in there is really informed by all your experiences and all your mistakes and all your connections, everything you did up to this point. And I think it's beautiful to have projects like this, because it is a big, you're opening yourself up. I'm sure it's a lot of times really going out of your comfort zone. It's not the easiest thing to, put a face on it, put yourself behind it and say, hey, here I am. Here is all the info, and I really respect that. I think it's really courageous also to do these kind of projects, and ultimately, I see really the value in it, especially for people starting out, to have this sort of resource. I mean, for present, I always have in the back of my mind to create something that I would wish to have myself.
Yeah.
I can imagine it might be for you a similar thing.
Like, the same. Yeah.
It would be amazing to have something like Otto Resources, a website like this, when you were maybe studying or trying to find more out. I think that's a really nice guiding principle to create something that you would wish to have, or think back about the time.
Exactly.
Exactly. What were you missing, and make it maybe then a little bit, a little bit easier maybe for the people who are starting out now. That's it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's important to raise the baseline of knowledge, or raise the baseline of accessible knowledge. And again, also, if we are to stand a chance of going against this toxic gatekeeping culture, which again is something I fundamentally disagree with.
Yeah.
I think that there's someone at my window. People just look in the studio, and then they walk past, they stop, they stare at you, and then they walk away. Sometimes they try and come in. I just stood at the
It's so
window.
funny.
Anyway, exactly, but it's something that, and I think that this is again the much deeper thinking of Otto. When I was, I'm not going to say when I was starting out, because I'm still starting. It's never finished. I'm never at the end of this journey. But when I was doing this at the beginning of my journey, I was on Wikipedia a lot. I was on these websites that, aesthetically speaking, disastrous. They work, they're highly functional, but there's just something that doesn't inspire you. You're not like, why should I pay more attention to this part of the information as opposed to this? Wikipedia kind of plateaus. Everything is kind of put onto an equal importance, which is fine. It's highly functional. But I was like, obviously now the future generations, they have a different requirement. They need to be informed as to why one thing is more important than the other, or why they should really take the time to learn a specific topic or a specific subject. And that was also like one of the main an impetus for Otto. It's like, how do we take the perhaps plateaued representation that you see on Wikipedia, for example, and make it a bit more dynamic, make it a bit more accessible, make it so that people can actively differentiate between stuff that is important and less important. And yeah, I think that after thinking about this, that then slowly became our North Star, which is, for me, it's stupidly ambitious, because I know that to achieve something like this is going to take decades of my life, decades of my dedication, and decades of my energy. I want to create the Wikipedia for product design, or specifically fashion product design. This for me is the North Star. This is what guides
Amazing.
Every decision I make with Otto, I'm like, I want to make Wikipedia again. And it's like, you know,
I love it. I love overly ambitious goals.
And
fantastic.
I look at it sometimes and I'm like, this is a lot, but it's also, it's a life work for me. I see Otto as a life work. I will look back on this in 20, 30, 40 years and say, look at this database that I built. Even if it were to help a couple of people, be it a handful, it doesn't need to help the world. I hope it will, of course, but even if it doesn't, I will feel gratified knowing that I dedicated part of my life to researching and to helping people raise their own understanding of things, and also maybe even improve the results that we see in an industry that I am genuinely interested in. Fashion, for example.
Thank you for sharing this. This is amazing, I think. What a nice manifesto. Because maybe that's interesting, because we're both so personally attached to our work and our projects. As we both said, it's like really, we see, for me present, for you Otto, really as like a life's work. And for us, this means very, very long term. I think I will try to work on this project as long as I can. And I really see this as the ultimate long-term project. But of course, this also means there is not really a finishing line. And also there's never an ending of all the things you could do to improve the project, or all the tasks, of course, all the ideas, all the ambitions. And I think this is a big challenge again, also to how do we deal with that? Obviously, we love what we're doing. Otherwise, I don't think we would have this drive or this energy every day to keep on working on it. But yeah, we talked about it in a previous conversation, that it also can be dangerous, or as you said, like a sand trap. Also, I wrote down this quote, I think it was of Confucius, that choose a job you love and you will never have to work a day in your life. And I think that's really misleading. Because I think
it is a bit misleading.
Yeah. Like also it can be dangerous, because then it's dangerous in the sense that what happens if there's a day where you don't love what you're doing? There is a time where maybe that means you should just rest and not overwork yourself and not force it. But also in the creative process, there are just days where you don't feel like it. And as I take this metaphor of sports a lot. Sometimes it's really about discipline and just like still doing it and just giving it a go, and not be so blocked by emotions of like, or like, I don't feel like doing it. And, if I would only work on present when I 100% feel like it, or when I think, oh my God, I love this, then I wouldn't produce much because that's just human nature, that we, that our resistance or whatever it is, wants to hold us back to achieving our dreams. Like, I think like these super ambitious goals, like really actualizing also ourselves and what we can give to the world. There's a part of us who doesn't want us to go that way, I feel, because it's tied to a lot of risks and danger, and you could look stupid. And, all these doubts in our heads, we have to also kind of fight against that, I think, to be able to create something that really moves the needle, or really, makes changes.
I mean, this particular quote that you you reference, I think I realized I used to kind of say something similar to this to myself to justify these abnormal working hours, I think that, it's very hard to say, I don't know if it has a lot to do with doing something that you love. I think it also has a lot to do with people's personal disposition.
Yeah.
I'm the kind of person that if I have my mind set on something, I'll just keep going until it's achieved through thick and thin. And I think that even though I love what I do, theoretically, I think that's not necessarily what's driving me. It's just more this compulsion. Of course, the love that I have is my passion, effectively. It's an important part. It brings me joy. It makes me feel happy when I'm doing it. But what perpetuates this negative working approach, I just think, is more on a subconscious level, potentially. The fact that I'm the kind of person that if I start something, I will finish it at some point. That doesn't mean that I'm not enjoying it, and that's the thing. That's where I also had to draw this distinction between my love for what I do and the subconscious thing of me just needing to finish things and to see everything through kind of situation, That's kind of this weird divide. And I think when I didn't really understand this, I was using this quote to kind of justify it, being like, yeah, it's okay that I work all weekend because I love my job and I do what I love. when I think at the core of that, it was me being like, Adam, you're like incessantly working towards something because you can't just let it rest for a day, So I think that's something that I'm definitely on a journey on by myself personally, is just to try to find more of a balance, because also finding this balance in your work allows you to also be more present, I think. And it's something that I particularly struggle with because, what we mentioned at the beginning of this call, as a creative, when you're constantly trying to sell your service, you're constantly trying to justify your value as a creative in an industry, or especially in a city like Berlin that's full of creative people. Your whole story or your whole day-to-day is dictated by all of the rejections that you maybe had yesterday or things that didn't go so well yesterday, while also thinking that, shit, if I don't pull something over the line soon, I'm going to be in a spot of trouble in a couple of weeks, And because you're constantly oscillating between these two poles, no matter how much you love your job, it kind of restricts you from being present in the moment. So yeah, I think looking at this idea of loving what you do needs to be taken with a degree of perspective. Perspective meaning, is it my own disposition that's actually driving me to work in such an unhealthy way?
Right.
Or is it really love? Is it something that I really love? And I think love and gratification that you get from actually completing something are two very different things, in my opinion. And it's a difficult question to answer, because I think that I do love what I do, but on the other side, I get an extreme gratification from actually finishing something, no matter how long it takes.
It's
and this blurs the line.
Where this comes from, some sort of, I don't know. For me, it was a lot of things I think informed by this like footballer mindset in a way. Still things that I have today, of this like having ambitious projects and like dreaming big, and like this notion also of practice. This is why I think I'm also deep into habits, or trying to have really consistency. I'm also seeing creativity or being creative. I'm really trying to see it as a craft and as a everyday process and practice, rather than, waiting to be kissed by the muse, or like, I'm a creative person, so good ideas will come. So I think good ideas come when you, when you're working, or when you're actively giving an effort, or also when you're actively trying to not work all the time, and then trying to really have a great resting phase, or when you're really trying to, get closer to your body, like when you're doing stuff that's really physical. I'm wondering, maybe this ties well to the previous question. How do you deal with overwork, or how do you deal when you're getting stressed, or when you feel, man, I should really take a break? Or do you have these feelings? How do you basically, focus or reboot, especially when there's a lot going on, or when you feel there's a really stressful phase?
Yeah, I mean, this kind of feeling I definitely have on a daily basis. Say, if not every 2 days, I have this feeling of being overwhelmed. Also because, again, if we talk about the North Star of Otto again, it's just so ambitious that you can't even, I feel like, at least in my own head, in my own weird, obscured thinking sometimes, that like I can't take a day off. It needs to be done. The world needs a platform like this. You can't stop. Kind of thing. So it's a very difficult question for me to answer, because when I am in this moment of high pressure, I think my brain shuts down because there's just so much going on. And honestly, I just need to try, if I can, and sit down and just stare at the wall a little bit, not do anything, you know? I'm not this kind of person that can say, okay, I'm hyper stressed, it's not going well, I'm just going to go for a run, or I'm going to go to the gym and let some steam off. It doesn't work like that with me, because I'll go on a run or I'll go to the gym and my head will still be full of all of these problems, effectively. What I've found, and I don't know whether you would consider this healthy or whether it's a coping mechanism, but you know, this German expression like Auge zu und durch kind of thing. If I'm met with this incredibly challenging and you know, energy heavy situation, oftentimes my only solution to get to the stage where I can actually relax and take a breather is just to do it. You know, I knuckle down and I get it done, you know. Of course, there's always this moment, you know, this fleeting 30 minutes where I'm running around the house frantically pacing, like trying to compartmentalize all of these stresses and all of this input. But then what ultimately brings me clarity and allows me to actually get past this is I get it done. I just put my head down and I make it happen. And, you know, I try in these moments of high stress to get it done, not in a perfect way, just to get it done to some degree that is acceptable. That for me helps me cope with it. So at this point, I try to push the perfectionism aside, which is something I rarely do. I'm an incredibly detail-orientated person. Everything needs to be perfect, which often hinders me. But in situations of high stress, I try, even though it's difficult for me, I try to be as pragmatic as possible. And I'm like, just finish it to some degree, so that then you can afford yourself some headspace to get outside, go to the gym, free yourself a little bit, you know? So
like the first draft or the first outline or the first, exactly. I think it's a really good tactic, because you finish something, a first draft, give yourself some time to digest. You have a structure, basically a first structure, and then you can take some time off to kind of fill it or reiterate or edit. And also, I mean, this perfectionism part is really important, I think, because we can get blocked so easily by perfectionism, right? And then not delivering anything because we like over engineer it, or like completely get lost in the details. And it's really also about being present in the sense of being aware of what is actually important here. And what's important most of the time is that you actually deliver something. It's better to deliver something imperfect and then iterate, or then also give other people a chance, you know, to give yourself to give you feedback and then go back at it again. But we need to put out something to get this feedback and to get people to share it. And a lot of times it's also fear, because of course, if we finish something and people can give us feedback, it makes us also vulnerable and open to critique and everything. So I think this is also always a big part of this harmful perfectionism. Once you finish something, it's there and it's vulnerable. So just to add on this, we had it in a previous conversation with us being from a generation and taking a long time to finish something. But this is a bit of a different topic. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think though what it kind of builds into, I guess it is quite similar for you at present. It certainly is the case for me at Otto. The reason that I am so meticulous and driven by perfection is because I see, or at least I ideally want to see, everything that we put on Otto being added to the canon of internet. I want everything that we write about to be as relevant today as it is in 10 years. So approaching our projects, approaching everything that we publish and everything that we talk about with this mindset is incredibly difficult, because it requires a high level of detail. It requires you to be perfect to some degree, because I'm always thinking, yes, we can iterate it. Obviously, everything can change, you know, but once you publish something the first time, you don't want it to kind of change too much, you know. In that sense, I approach Otto a bit like a print project. So it's like, if we put it on the website, it needs to also be nice to read in 10, 20, 30 years. And because that for me is a core part of our mission. We're trying to raise the baseline of information. And you can't raise the baseline of accessible information if this baseline keeps tweaking and you keep changing stuff, you know? So I think that also perpetuates a certain approach to this, you know, toxic perfectionism or bad perfectionism, so to say.
Makes sense.
I haven't really personally found a way around it, or at least not something that I would ever stand behind. You know, I would never say, oh yeah, if I'm stressed, I just go and do this and then I feel better. Like I've never been that person, and I'm confident that I never will be that person. But I found that the way I deal with it, like I said, is to break out of this perfectionism a bit. You know, some of the best things I've written, some of the best ideas I've had is when I'm completely shattered after a full day of work, lying in bed on my laptop, and this 30 minutes before I go to sleep, it all just kind of comes out of me somehow, you know. And this is also my own understanding of being present, is that you can allow yourself this flow of consciousness, which I think is incredibly important. Because in this moment where I'm so physically and mentally drained, I don't consider things so deeply as I normally would. I don't let this perfectionism hold me back. I just let my brain lock in, and this just kind of flow just spills out of me, and I just type. I don't edit, I don't think, I just go, I research, I read. And I'm a big fan of doing that because it breaks me out of this negative cycle of perfectionism. It allows me to unwind, because it also feels like, even though I'm very tired, and yes, I'm still working, I'm not detaching from the work, which is not a good thing, but still I am allowing my brain and my body to just completely let go effectively. This is how I let go. And that for me has always been very important, because I work with references, I work with information, you know, my brain is full of stuff constantly, that in moments like this, it's so incredibly liberating for me, because it's the one moment, this 30 minutes before bed, when I'm knackered, it just all kind of comes out, you know, and I feel like I'm almost like I'm turning the tap on my head, almost like I turn the tap on and it all just goes whoo. And then it truly is so liberating for me, because once I do it and I sit there and I just write all this nonsense on a page, or I read something, or I look at rubbish images, I feel so freed from the process in some weird way. Like I've taken all this creative potential, let's call it, and put it out. It's not perfect by any means, but it's out there. Great. Now we can do something with it.
I love it. Is it almost like, is it really like a habit? Is it something that is really, that you do consciously on a regular basis, that you say like every other day before sleeping? Or is it more like really it happens when it happens?
It happens when it happens. Like,
so there's also days it's not when you just like sit habitual. Down and yeah. But it seems like you, since a long time, you're writing a lot on a regular basis. That's
of course,
a huge part of
just to get it out.
Yeah.
It's cathartic for me to some degree. You know, it really helps me detach. But it's not habitual at all, Hugo. And it's for me, this moment of my work is the true definition of, for me, creative flow, because it sometimes it takes me. It just will hit randomly. I'll think I think I'm working on a client project, and then suddenly I'll just sidetrack and just start doing something else. And then I slip into this mode, and I could spend 30 minutes, I could spend an hour, I could spend 2 hours, you know.
So you enter a real flow, a real zone there, and just let it all out. And then the editing parts, you take care of it later. So it's more about a real brain dump or like a drainage.
Exactly. It's a brain dump. It's a drainage of my brain completely. And it just happens when it happens. I also think that to habitualize something like this wouldn't have the same effect, you know, because then it becomes a task, and it becomes something I need to do. And the beauty of this process, of this cathartic losing myself in my thoughts kind of thing, it needs to happen by itself. You know, your brain needs to trigger you. Like it's like this weird, the apex or the sweet spot of being mentally and physically perhaps tired, having ideas for projects, having read something inspiring earlier that week that you maybe just comes back in a flash.
So it's not always just like a full text that you're writing, but it's more like tapping into what your brain is, what crazy idea you get in a moment, and you just capture it, which I think is it's especially as creatives, but I think for everyone, it's such an important habit to have, to just like as soon as something hits you, your brain makes a new connection to really also capture it and put it somewhere safe. Because first of all, the brain, I mean, if you don't do that, the brain is amazing because it tries to make you remember if it's really important, but it has to work really hard to store it somewhere and then it like bring it back to the forefront. So it's almost like a computer RAM thing.
Completely.
You know? And I always see it like it's like letting everything out and putting it somewhere safe, and then the brain is also free again to think of new things and make new connections. But it's a really important habit to store your thoughts or ideas in the moment,
or just to be spontaneous enough to take this opportunity. So I guess in that respect, I said, you know, we don't want to habitualize it in the sense I don't want to say that every night for 30 minutes I'm just going to do my little brain dump and just lose myself in my crazy thoughts. But I think to habitualize it in the sense that when it strikes, you know that, okay, I'm going to stop whatever I'm doing and I'm going to take the time to indulge in this. And that's, I would say, what I do, you know, like for me, it could be any time, Hugo. Typically, it's like I said, it's before bed that it kind of happens. But it could also happen now after this call. And I've gotten into the habit of saying, okay, when it happens, I'm just going to stop and just brain dump, basically. And I think that's been very helpful for me in terms of my creative process, in terms of just relieving my head of the clutter, because the very nature, like I said already, the very nature of my business, the very nature of me remaining, let's say, competitive as a product consultant is that I have access to more and more and more information constantly, you know? So there's a moment where up there, it's just so full of everything. Not necessarily all good or helpful things. That these moments are just very important to let it all out and
100%
reset. So just
100%. Amazing. Adam, last question to wrap it up.
Tell me. Yes.
What's your favorite unrealized project? Do you have a dream brand or maybe a studio you like to work for? What's your ultimate project? It can be also something that you have on your bucket list for a long time and just didn't get around doing.
I would say, I can probably speak more to the dream project side of things because, you know, as already mentioned, this whole unrealized thing for me is very difficult for me to accept sometimes, you know, like it's like it's either going to be a success or it's going to be a complete flop. At the end of the day, it's going to get done. So if I could work sincerely speaking, if I could work for any brand, there are, I think, three that come to mind specifically. The first one being Engineered Garments. Engineered Garments is helmed by a incredible designer called Daiki Suzuki, someone who I have looked up to for many, many years. And his partner, Keizo Shimizu, who is kind of the head behind, they work on Nepenthes, which is the big Japanese fashion house together. But Keizo Shimizu also works on a brand called Needles. And I think what these two brands and these two designers and figures have taught me is about the power of referencing, the power of respectfully understanding a subject and being able to bring it back to life. In their case, they circle a lot around Americana, military heritage designs, and they are always able to bring it back in a way that is quintessentially unique to them. So I think if I could not work, I would never want to work for Engineered Garments or Needles. I would want to learn from them. I would love to just bask in the knowledge and information that Mr. Suzuki or Mr. Shimizu would surely be able to give me. I would happily just follow. And I think that for me has always been very interesting, because I've truly admired these brands. And like I said, I feel like working for them would only be a disservice to them. I don't think I'm at the level to be able to work for companies like this, especially because of what they mean to me on a personal level. And they were so influential to me. I remember when I bought my first Engineered Garments jacket in Copenhagen during my internship, my colleague put me onto the brand and I bought this jacket, and I was like, as soon as I bought that, I was like, it was a snowball. I was like, this is what I like. This is what I like, not only from the design, but the textile and also the reference, how they've reinterpreted it. I was like, this for me is a story in a piece of clothing. So like I said, for me, I have such a high respect for this brand that I would feel worried that my contribution wouldn't necessarily be beneficial to them. But from a personal perspective, to be able to shadow them, to be able to follow them, would, I think, probably be something that I would much prefer and find much more value in. And the same goes for a brand like Visvim. Visvim is another Japanese brand run by Hiroki Nakamura, and it's the same kind of thing. I've followed this brand. I'm completely enamored in their approach to design, their approach to production, everything, referencing. It's all so tactfully put together and communicated that I think, again, like, I would never want to work for them as a product design consultant. I would just want to work for them as a student, happily. For any of these three brands, I would just be honored to basically sit, watch, learn, absorb, which is what all of these guys did before they even started the brand. Before these brands became so prolific, they made a point of fluently understanding the subject matter that they wanted to communicate through their projects. And that, again, is the whole MO of Otto. It's like, you can't do anything, in my opinion, you can't do anything without knowledge, without information. Take time before putting yourself out there, before being so eager to put your mark or your name on something. Do your due diligence, know what you're talking about. Because that, at the end of the day, is what will define a project. You can see straight through these projects that don't have any soul, or have just kind of been built as a pure marketing ploy. What is the real substance of what it is that you're trying to propose? What are your interests? And I think that's why I resonate with these brands so much, because going back to what I told you about Urban Outfitters, when I learned to really stand behind the things or the references that I was interested in, they've done exactly the same.
Yeah.
They took their references, they learned them fluently, and they stood behind them. And this created such a unique project that is still relevant today. And in my opinion, will never lose relevancy. It will maintain forever, because, like I said, it's built from a foundation of knowledge.
Beautiful.
So drop
nice.
The mic.
It's so fascinating. It's so nice. I am also, it's for me always fascinating to hear about other people's references and bubbles, for lack of a better term, because it's, for you, this is kind of the center of, or like your poles. I'm sometimes talking about poles of projects, and for me, it's obviously then completely different. For everyone, they have different poles, but for each individual, it's their poles and their little center of the universe, or like the solar system, let's say,
exactly.
of your creativity and of your being. And it's so fascinating to tap into poles of different people, especially people you respect so much as I do you and what you are doing. So I also make sure I will check out these brands. I think Muslim is.
I'm going to send them to you. You've got some links to send me.
Yeah,
and I've got
send them to me, and maybe also. I think it would be also cool to share this in the show notes, or however we share this conversation, for people to dig deeper into these references also.
That would be great. Yeah, we totally need to align on this, Hugo, like how we also want to communicate it. Like this is let's make this a resource. Let's make this talk a resource 100%. That people can read about, they can engage with,
100%. And we'll send this conversation to the Japanese gentleman to get you a job as a student.
I would love it, honestly.
Oh, man.
Just to learn.
So nice.
Yeah.
Such a nice, also a nice goal. And I think I have the feeling every day you're getting closer and closer to this, to be organically invited by your heroes to do this. You're doing the right things. I think
I would love to. I mean, everything I do is built around, in some way, it's my interpretation of what they did, And it's like, what better way to also improve my own learning and my own approach than by learning from the people who are, in my opinion, did it first and did it the best.
100%. Yeah.
And like I said, it's totally conflicting, because it's like, yes, of course I would love to say that I designed this engineered garments product. But at the same time, it's like, I don't know if I would want that truly in my soul and in my own perception of the value of my work. It's like, I wouldn't want that, really. I would feel like it would not be right, because I don't have 20, 30 years of experience that has informed that product. I am just me with, and I've been doing this now for 5 years as a product consultant. I was like, that's not enough. It doesn't even scratch the surface of being able to do this justice. So, yeah.
Fascinating. No, I love it. Adam, thank you for sharing all this. It was such an insightful conversation. I think there's so many gems and so many insights and nuggets of wisdom here. And
happy to hear that.
And I thank you for helping me out on this journey and having the trust.
You're more than welcome, Hugo. Really, it's really beautiful for me, and I love what you're doing with Present. So let's put our heads together and make this like a nice communication activity, and give this to people, as people who are interested, of course.
Fantastic. Adam, cool. I wish you safe travels, and
thank you.
We will talk more for the next steps and make this a really nice resource. I love this approach and this perspective.
You can count on me. Just tell me what you need. I'm totally down. Let's do it.
Cool. Adam, thank you so much. And bye for now.
Thank you, Hugo.
And we keep and talk to you very soon. And thank you again for doing this. It was so much fun, and
of course,
man, so much good material. Amazing.
I'm glad.